fascinating book because this is truly the age of urbanization. And cities actually occupy just 3% of the Earth's land mass, but they emit about 2/3 of the greenhouse gas emission. And actually, there are several studies which show that by 2030, they'll house about 70% of the world's population will be living in cities. If emerging countries like India were to follow the model of the developed world in terms of urbanization, and many of us, India's just started the process of urbanization. Actually, you'll require 4 planet Earth. Alas, you have only 1 planet Earth, and therefore, countries like India require a far more innovative and sustainable. Now, there have been other studies, one by McKinsey recently, which shows that by 2030, you will have 350 million people getting into the process of urbanization. By 2050, 700 additional Indians will get into the process of urbanization. That's almost 2.5 times the population of the United States of America. Now, if that is the biggest challenge, and to my mind, India has been a very, very reluctant urbanizer. India has been a very reluctant urbanizer because of our belief in our founding father that our villages will be economically viable, they'll be economically self-independent, but this very rapid advance and this very rapid march of urbanization is inevitable. And as we talk here today, every minute, there are 30 Indians moving from rural areas to urban areas. So to my mind, urbanization is here, it is going to happen, and it's very important that India gets it right. And India, while it's a reluctant urbanizer, India has got a huge opportunity. India has got an opportunity to leapfrog, to my mind. And there are several issues which Vandana has talked about here. She's given this great example of Greater Noida. She's used this acronym of GIN, do not grab, do not isolate, and do not neglect. She talks about, and she says, is urbanization really our future? To my mind, urbanization is our future, and urbanization is our future if we get it right. And to my mind, there are a couple of things which are very critical, very significant. We must plan out properly, and planning is going to be very different from what the planning was when Europe and America urbanized. When America urbanized, land, gas, and water were very cheaply available, and because they were very cheaply available, America made sprawling cities. You could live in New Jersey, you could travel to New York, guzzle gas all the way through. They could make a city like Atlanta where 98.2% of the people could use cars. You can't do this anymore. So today's cities have to be very compact, they have to be very dense, and they have to be, to my mind, they have to be on the back of public transportation. Your entire urban planning has to be on the back of mass transit corridors. And to my mind, it's very critical that we do recycling of water and we do recycling of waste. Some of these issues are very critically raised in the Urban Villager by Vandana. She talks about Greater Noida having been created without access to Greater Noida, without proper transportation linkage to Greater Noida. She talks about the fact that you've created a city which was meant for industrialization under the New Okhla Industrial Development Authority Act, which was actually meant for industrialization, but master plans were changed and everybody went in for housing. She talks about the fact that you've created a city without power. So to my mind, while this is a huge opportunity for India, urbanization is inevitable, there's a huge opportunity. The model of urbanization is very critical. It has to be very different. And just to give you one example of 2 cities made at the same point of time in history, Atlanta and Barcelona. Atlanta, 98.2% of the people travel by car, and therefore its ecological footprint is 12 times more than Barcelona. And if in Barcelona 66% of the people go by public transport system, another 18% either cycle or walk. And therefore, if you were today to alter the model of Atlanta to bring its ecological footprint to the same level as that of Barcelona, you'll have to literally destroy Atlanta. You'll have to demolish it totally and build a new city with 2,619 new metro stations. Alas, that is not possible, and therefore to my mind, planning on the back of public transportation systems, recycling of water, recycling of waste, and these are very critical. And therefore, the future for India really lies in compact, dense, recyclable cities of the future. And many of these lessons come not from the western part of the world, they come from the eastern part of the world. They come from places like Kitakyushu, they come from Yokohama, they come from Singapore in terms of water. But this is a fascinating book. These are all experts who've written extensively on urbanization, and I think it's better that we get into the panel discussion so that we can have a thought-provoking discussion. Thank you very much.
Let's start with the release of the book, please, sir. Welcome to discussion about cities and about writing about cities, which in my head I've been calling texts in the city. From grand illusions to matters of rats, from beautiful things to urban villages, the last few years have witnessed an explosion of writing about cities. This is the period in which the forces of globalization have brought McDonald's and American-style diners to the furthest reaches of the planet. Perhaps because we need to convince ourselves that we haven't all become homogenized into a giant Coca colony, we seem to have developed a heightened interest in literature about specific places, especially about cities. As cities around the world have increasingly come to resemble each other, with glassy office towers and cookie-cutter malls that all seem to stock the same Barilla pasta and Zara summer dresses, we seem eager to convince ourselves that our urban experiences are somehow unique, and to try to discover the specific histories about the cities that we visit on business and on pleasure. So without further ado, let's get down to our panel. On the face of it, the two books we're talking about today would seem to be completely paradoxical. Vandana's Urban Villager is about an urbanity struggling to be born. Indy's Grand Illusions considers the notion of what it means to be in a city that has been diagnosed to be in its death throes. But there are also a startling number of similarities. To begin with, both of them discuss their cities' mythologies, both religious and secular. And I wondered, Indy, if you could start by telling us about the myths that contribute to the idea of Calcutta.
I was in Calcutta till I was 27. So before that, I knew not the world, except, through the normal transmissions of, television, books, etc. So for me, Calcutta was and I'm sort of uppercasing everything I'm saying here now, was the capital of culture. And the of is also uppercased here because otherwise things will not be good. I think one of the sort of myths about, in terms of it's almost like it's sort of open season for anybody to do whatever they want to it, consensually, of course. So that's for me one of the big myths, the mother myths, and there's sort of beautiful things happening because of that. I think for myself, when I realized that there is a world outside Calcutta physically out there, and sort of I started looking for jobs or sort of traveling, and it was not so much about sort of matching what my idea of, let's say, Delhi was with this that I'm sitting in, but it was interesting dissonance. And I think the Calcutta that all of us have in mind, whether I'm a insider, outsider, somebody in between, I think it's one of the strange cities, I would say sort of strangest in a positive sense, which allows you to sort of get as many rabbits out of the box. And I think that for me is one of the things I talk about in the book, the hundreds of rabbits that come out of that Calcutta box.
Tell us something about the rabbits. What are the constituents of this culture?
I think the book is basically a lot of case studies of each and every sort of myth that I could think of within the sort of a space-time of 150 odd pages, etc. But I'm just coming back to, let's talk about a fixation that all of us sort of know about Calcutta, Ravindra Sangeet. I think one of the things that everybody expects Kolkata to be sort of radiating with, let's say, even when you're in space, is that a harmonium is going to ring and that somebody or a mass of people are... Sharnath has, he's singing it in his head right now anyway, but the point is, like, I kind of think about it in the sense like, it's like a gentleman, he's a great writer of short stories, I love him for his short stories and certain things, but I'm talking about the veneration of it. So we're talking about somebody who was born in the, correct me if I'm wrong, Bengalis here, but like in the late 19th century and died in 1941. So that's like saying that somebody like Alfred Lord Tennyson is the biggest fat cat in sort of British writing today. So that's a sort of that's a latch-on myth that I can immediately think of. There's this other thing which is about Kolkata becoming the more obvious banal element is like Mamata Banerjee, the chief minister, saying that I want to make it a second London. She should first try and make it a second, probably Meerut, and then sort of take it one by one. But there's this sort of, to quote a sort of phrase from an adjoining state, there's a creamy layer in Calcutta, and I'm not talking about West Bengal or Bengal itself, but which is incredibly delusional in a sort of quite neurotic sense, in the sense that they're the forebears of Lord Curzon. And, you know, they'll probably spot split infinitives in Rudyard Kipling. They want their club sandwich in a proper way. They wear their cravats in July in Calcutta, even though it doesn't look exactly like Devonshire. So that is, I think, a part of this sort of notion that Calcutta is somehow connected to, I mean, I mention it sort of as a sort of metaphor, but the Calcutta airport is, this used to be the case. I think it's not the case last 15, 20 years in the sense of Calcutta becoming more a part of India, as it were. But earlier the joke was that, you know, the Calcutta airport connects only to Heathrow and JFK. We've heard something about some Bombay airport and Delhi airport, but India's there. But we're more into, you know, PG Woodhouse and stuff like that and only. So that's another sort of, let me hitch a ride with, and I don't sort of completely blame the thing, because Calcutta is a British city once made and plonked in the south of Bengal. And then after that, it's a question of whether people have been able to take care of it. I mean, it's a situation of bad caretakers, really.
Vandana, even as Greater Noida emerges from the farmland, you actually realize, as you say in your book, that sort of it's full of stories, and you went around reclaiming and sort of almost in this archaeological fashion, recovering these stories. What are some of the stories you found, and how did you go about finding them?
The original people who are there, who are getting urbanized, who are also urban villagers. So, and it was fascinating to unearth these stories, not only of the ancient stories and myths, but also the modern stories that are occurring of land tussles, of, Greater Noida suddenly becoming this epicenter of private education, not because of any noble intention to spread higher learning, but because of land, and how land is really driving everything there, and how villages and traditional communities in villages have suddenly got money and changed their entire, the way they have weddings, and they have, which used to be simple affairs, have suddenly become this wild party thing with the DJ playing all night. So there were fascinating strands which made up this story, which I unearthed as I went along.
So when newer people come and settle on the farmland, how do these old stories make their way into a new neighborhood, or do they at all? Are they completely obliterated?
I would think that they are fading away, because the intrusion of the city into the countryside is so dominant and so brutal that it's the village life is surely and but fast fading away. And there are people who've told me, for example, a Gujar old man told me that they have their own folk songs. You wouldn't think that. You would think that the trance and the Bollywood music that they play is their music, but they have their own folk songs, which apparently, ironically, have been copied by Bollywood filmmakers now and played back at those weddings again really loudly. So it's sort of losing out to popular stuff, and it's hard in the face of the money that has come in. It's all about culture is the last thing they're worried about. It's all about building that big koti and buying an SUV and not knowing what to do with that huge amount of money that comes in.
You know, the architect Rahul Mehrotra suggested that there are actually two kinds of cities in every Indian metro. So one is what he calls the static city, the city of steel and brick and concrete. And the other is what he calls the kinetic city, the city that exists between the cracks. It's in the kinetic city, Mehrotra says, architecture is no longer the spectacle of the city, but it's processions and festivals, it's culture that actually sort of becomes the spectacle in memory. I found it quite interesting if one was to sort of use this way of looking at cities, that in Greater Noida, the spectacle of the city is that F1 track that they built. Tell us something about that.
Okay, so the F1 track is Greater Noida's big thing. You know, since 2 years, it's like it's the jewel in the little town which they want to show off. But if you, but when I went about speaking to villages around the F1 track, and it's quite a different story. It's the villages around there have been sort of blocked away by a huge wall that has been set up for the track. And there's a lot of angst there about the way the land was taken away from them, apparently by a huge document in English which promised that there would be industries on that land, and everyone signed it thinking that their children would get jobs, but and they found that there's this big private guy who's building an F1 Formula One track. And there could have been imaginative ways to use that, and I think maybe I want Amitabh to comment on that. For example, there are foreigners who come there who need places to stay, and there could be imaginative tourism of, you know, giving them a sort of a taste of rural living if that was channeled properly. But they've literally been shut out by this huge wall, and all that has done, even cut off the road which they normally used to get to the town. So all that has done is just created a whole lot of resentment. And I remember one farmer telling me, "Kam se kam humko pass to de dete wo show dekhne ke liye," but absolutely no involvement at all. And it's a real example of the complete dichotomy in our urbanization process. As somebody who's has led tourism in a big way, maybe you want to comment on how we could.
You know, I mean, if you look around the world, great cities are not made by buildings and malls, and actually, historically, great cities are those cities which have, it's the people of the city who make it great, and actually great cities are those which have great amount of cultural and artistic vibrancy. And I mean, it's across Europe, it's across America, that the people of the city and its cultural vibrancy, which is not the brick and mortar. And to my mind, it's very important that when India gets into new urbanization, which increasingly it'll have to, because there's a huge impetus taking place of people moving from rural to urban areas, we need a far more inclusive approach. And I think that the key to that is that actually the role of the state is very critical. We have two models of this, one on one side of Delhi, which is Gurgaon, where private sector came in. So you had a model where DLF, Ansal, Unitech came in, and they kind of went into monetization of land values. They created brick and mortar approach, and actually the trunk infrastructure was never created. So 4 decades down the line, it's now that they're talking about drainage, sewage, solid waste, etc. Greater Noida is another case, another example where government did the trunk infrastructure, land values went up, but the land values were captured by the political parties. On one side they were captured by the real estate players, on the other side they were captured by political parties. So the Amar Singhs of the world, the Mayavatis of the world all became rich on land price appreciation. It's very important to my mind that when the trunk infrastructure actually is created by the government, and when values rise up, the actual landowners and the farmers, they benefit from it. So to my mind, the key to that is good town planning. The key to that is a transparent process of town planning, doing that town planning process, going through it in a very transparent manner, making it accessible to the people, the government doing not the gross acquisition, not the entire acquisition, but only the net acquisition. And that is only the acquisition for the trunk infrastructure, drainage, sewage, solid waste, etc. And leaving the rest of the rest of the land in accordance with the master plan to be built. If I'm a farmer, I own the land in accordance with my master plan in a transparent manner, I should be able to sell it to the industrialist and capture the land value, upsides of that land value. And that, to my mind, is the key of doing inclusive development. And as India gets into more and more urbanization, and that, to my mind, really holds the key. If India is going to grow at rapid rates, it will have to be on the back of urbanization. But India's urbanization must be sustainable. India's got a huge opportunity. It's been a very, very reluctant urbanizer. But being a reluctant urbanizer, it has opportunity in two things. It holds the model, it holds the unique opportunity of creating a model for the rest of the world in terms of sustainability. One. Number two, that is, how do you do compact, dense development, use lesser amount of land to do compact, dense development. Also, how do you use digital technology? And that, to my mind, is very important. Because when urbanization happened across Europe and America, digital technology was not available. Today, you have to merge digital technology with geographical master planning and create smart cities of the future. And therefore, India has got this opportunity. Secondly, how do we make urbanization far more inclusive? How do we give a better returns, and how do we provide skills for our landowners? How do we make people move from agriculture to manufacturing in a far more systematic manner so that we provide skills and job opportunities for them as we move forward?
So we seem to have in place all the technological tools to build cities. Whether we're using them or no is debatable. But how does a planner create spaces that help manufacture that ineffable thing, a unique spirit of a place? How do you go about creating that as you build a Bombay-Delhi corridor, for instance? How do you give people a sense of uniqueness?
So, you know, one of the unique things is, I think, to my mind, this process of land acquisition is a dead model. And it'll increasingly being going to die because it's been vastly exploited by the system. And I think a very good model is what used to be done in Gujarat and parts of Maharashtra, and that is a process of town planning. And the town planning process is a process of public participation in the process of this. And actually, Gujarat implements that very effectively. They provide about 40% of the land for trunk infrastructure, but 60% of the land is actually held by the landowners. And actually, when you do the trunk infrastructure, their values really shoot up. So it's very important to involve the people in this. And we are doing a city called Dholera in Gujarat, and where every single landowner has been a part of this. It's been a very cumbersome process involving almost about 50,000 landowners. But today, everybody is a willing participant in that process of development, and there's been just about no hue and cry about this process of urbanization. But as I said, it's very important that urbanization is not about just technological innovation, or not what the urban planner does. It's not about what the urban designer does. It's not about just the technological creativity or the architectural creativity to that, but it's the artistic and cultural creativity which is very important. And therefore, right from the beginning, it's very important that we, in the process of urbanization, we make the people of that area very active participants in the process of the master planning, the urbanization. And as we move forward, the whole organic development of the city has to be based on the people playing a very critical role. Essentially, cities are made by people, to my mind.
You know, I was in Lisbon over the summer, as was Ratnesh Mathur, and as I was going through the streets, somebody told me about how you could construct an anthropology of Lisbon by looking at its clotheslines. So Lisbon, like many cities in Europe, is experiencing a declining population. With the economic recession, people are migrating for work, and it's also experiencing a declining birth rate. And you saw this when you looked at the clotheslines. Many of the clotheslines had only clothes of a single person there. Often it was an old woman, and true to stereotype, she wore only black dresses. If there were young couples, and you knew there were young couples because they had lacy underwear, they often had, very few of them had baby clothes on them. The only clothes lines that seemed to have baby clothes were clothes with salwar kameezes and sort of other immigrant clothes on them. And I thought that was quite interesting, sort of looking at a city through its clothes lines. Teju Cole, the Nigerian writer who's now writing a book about Lagos, says that the public transport is his book of the city. Did you all have devices that you all used in order to try to understand how your specific cities worked?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think one of the things that you mentioned was that, you know, people make a city, but I think cities make a people also. And I think I sort of clearly believe that it's a sort of two-way street. And I mean, when I've written about Calcutta, it's not also about one sort of slab of beef kind of thing. It's a sort of various different kinds of Calcutta which mix and match and sometimes don't match, etc. And the big sort of historic sort of movement away from a certain part of the city to another. It's never been really south to north, it's always been north to south. So there's a sort of mini story, I don't know why, you know, I mean, people normally call sort of diasporic novels which involve a woman in Boston remembering, let's say, Bombay or Delhi or Calcutta, but I can very well say that there are sort of mini diasporic novels there where, you know, somebody's moved from the north of Calcutta to the south 2 families ago, and it's actually 2 different cultures, which sort of the mythology of 2 different cultures, if you will. I'll give you a sort of a kind of pop cultural kind of thing, the sort of clothesline analogy kind of thing, in the sense there are a lot of mansions which are in the again in the north, which are essentially crumbling, broken down mansions with people living inside. And I don't know whether which came first, the egg or the chicken, but like, I mean, there's a sort of a strong, rich genre of ghost stories, for instance, which are based in this sort of Gothic element of I mean, it's not only specific to Calcutta, of course, it sort of goes beyond Calcutta, it goes to, you know, Khudito Pashan by Tagore.
Are we taking mics around?
Towards urban cities is inevitable. I think that's a fundamental flaw, in my opinion. Because Europe's urbanization is actually linked to a power concentration of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. And there was a very formal, you know, urbanization plan when that power was concentrated, where they measured even energy per capita in the cities, which were Austro-Hungarian cities. And, you know, so even energy was, so there was a great deal of measurement. Now, compared to where we are today, I mean, the city that I like to talk about, which we've been studying for the last 2 years, happens to be what was India's largest city from 2000 BC to 600 AD. So if you look at ASI's records, nearly 15% of the statues in National Museum come from a town about 3 hours drive from Delhi called Ahishetra in the Doab. Now that today is actually considered a village, but it was actually India's physically the largest city. The villages around it, and we've been traveling there for the last 2 to 3 years, we find, of course, it's a great place to pick up antiques. But apart from that, these villages have no toilets. The big difference between Europe and here is actually bad management. Yeah? I'll just simply put it like this. If you look at the 78 districts across UP and at least 150, 200 towns with populations bigger than European capitals, frankly, they're forgotten towns. And most of our urbanization seems to be happening in pockets in the Delhi, Bombay, Calcuttas, but these are discussion points. Part of the biggest problem that we have today is to do with jobs. Fact of the matter is that jobs are not being created. And why does the migrant come in to a new city? He's looking for new opportunities. Fact is that India today has only 34 million jobs and 680 million people of working age.
I may not like the process of urbanization. I mean, I'm not in favor of such a rapid process of urbanization. But you must accept the reality that it's happening. And it's happening despite the fact that the government of India, I mean, there are several studies which point to this fact that urbanization is happening. It's happening in an unplanned manner. All that I'm saying is that it's so inevitable that when you go from here to Jaipur, you just drive down from here to Jaipur, it's happening in a highly unplanned manner. It's happening because despite the fact that Government of India is putting all its resources on schemes like Narega, it's putting all its resources on rural development. Actually, the Government of India has since independence not spent much money on urbanization. The only scheme on which it spent money in urbanization was the JNURM, which came during the last 5-year plan. So it doesn't spend much money. But there is an aspirational India. I come from a village in eastern UP. I go to my village, I ask every single young man there, and the only dream of every young Indian there in that village is that he wants to go to the city and work in search of a job. In search of a job. Point is, we must understand that today, globally, if you look at it, and this is inevitable for India, and this is that 78% of the global GDP is coming from cities. The cities have become the global center house of driving growth and economic. Jobs are getting created in cities. You may try to, India since independence has consciously tried to create jobs in its rural areas through various schemes. It has not succeeded. I mean, why do you have a situation where 60% of the Mumbai lives in slums? If urbanization is inevitable, please do it. And all that I'm saying is, if urbanization is inevitable, please do it in a planned manner. India must urbanize. Don't do it in an unplanned, haphazard manner. You will create monstrous places. You will create places where Indians won't be able to live. You will create shanty towns. Please do it whatever we do, we must do it in a planned manner. Take people along. Please do it on the back of public transportation. Please do it in a manner where you recycle your waste. Please do it in a manner where we recycle our water. That's all that I'm saying.
Earlier, before the talk started, you said that we shouldn't look west but look east as model cities like Kitakyushu or Yokohama. Why did you say that? Why should we look east?
I said this because the Western model, to my mind, Western model of urbanization is a model based on private transportation. Actually, the American cities were all made for cars, and actually the American car companies America had a very thriving railway industry. The American car companies actually bought over the railway companies and killed them. They literally killed them economically so that the cars could sell. So actually American cities have all been made for cars. You can't walk, you can't cycle in American cities. Whereas in sharp contrast, several European cities, you can cycle, you can walk, etc. But why I talked about the Eastern model is because Kitakyushu is a great example because it became the real industrial driver of Japan's growth post-World War II. It became the most polluted city in the world. And in 70s, the people rose in revolt in Kitakyushu. But today, it is the most recyclable city. Everything is recycled, from motor cars to bulbs, to lights, to mobile phones. Everything is recycled. Yokohama, I said, because they reduced their wastage by about 41%. They reduced their waste by about 41%. I talked about East, I was talking about Singapore because it's a great example of how a city without water actually recycled its sewage water for human consumption. So these are great examples of reduction in waste, better usage of sewage water for drinking, human consumption, and in terms of recycling.
This is a chapter called The Murky Tales of Noida Extension. In 2009, the BSP government changed the land use of 2,500 hectares of the 3,000 hectares that forms Noida Extension from industrial to residential. The builders in turn started selling future flats to home buyers. Since then, this area of acres of mustard fields, vegetable growers and wheat crops slowly became a property bazaar. Every property dealer set up a colorful kiosk roundabout in the crossroads where one road led to Ghaziabad, one to Noida and one to Greater Noida. Salesmen would stand with pamphlets and much like hawkers at traffic signals selling cheap pens and toys, run behind vehicles waving the pamphlets. Does anyone stop and consider buying a flat that is vended like this? I wondered. Soon everywhere one looked, there was only construction. The green fields vanished and brown dug up land and construction workers formed the landscape. Like everywhere else in India, the workers were migrant laborers from the eastern states, barefoot and relentlessly carrying bricks or mud on their head in the dead heat of the afternoon, building Pacific Heights, heights of excellence, or Rajnigandha Greens, a joint venture with nature. A senior functionary in the authority believed that the blatant exhibitionism of middle-class dreams in Noida Extension is what really stoked the farmers' ire. On Sundays, so many cars used to come there. He said, tea and snacks used to be arranged. It was like a picnic. The farmer thought, all this is happening on my land and I'm not getting to be a part of it. Perhaps karma caught up with the greed that spawned this ill-conceived bit of urbanization. In the October 2011 judgment of the Allahabad High Court in the case of Farmers versus the Greater Noida Authority, the judgment prohibited any building activity to be undertaken there until the directions of the NCR board were incorporated in it. After this judgment, suddenly Noida Extension became a ghost town. The kiosks lay broken, their canopies fallen off, the pamphleteers who chased cars vanished, the banners promising resort-style living looked pathetic. The dug-up land was abandoned as projects were put on hold. The migrant laborers moved to greener pastures. One day I got a call from Dushyant Nagar, who is from Roja Jalalpur, one of the villages in this area. He had heard that I'm writing about Greater Noida and said he'd like to meet me. We decided to meet at the site of war, the Noida Extension Circle. I arrived there before him, so I waited under the generous shade of a neem tree. The congregation of real estate dealers around that circle had spawned its own tertiary industry. Next to me was a boy with a signboard flex board to replace all the billboards and banners that get torn in dust storms. A sugarcane stall was running on a noisy generator. Yadav Lassi stall had a picture of Kareena Kapoor holding a glass of lassi and smiling enticingly at potential property buyers. So this is about a music teacher in Greater Noida, a classical music teacher, Suchitrita Das. Suchitrita related the strangest requests that she had received since she started teaching music and dance in Greater Noida. One cold winter morning, a man in white sports shoes alighted from a car with 4 children ranging in age from 12 to about 8 years. He said he had come to Greater Noida a few years back from Bihar as a poor laborer who worked on construction sites. With time, he grew to become a thekedar, a contractor who employed laborers and assigned them to different building projects. He made a lot of money and built 4 houses. Then he contested the assembly elections from a constituency in Bihar. During the campaign, he had hired many singers and dancers who performed to entertain the crowds with a view to getting their votes. He had to pay them a lot of money, but he lost the elections, came second in the race and felt that the money he paid the performers was a waste because it couldn't even get him the votes. So he wanted Suchitrita to teach his own 4 children some singing and dancing so that they could perform in his campaigns during the next assembly elections. By keeping it all within the family, he would save on the money he spent on hiring entertainers from outside. He was sure his children would do a better job and make him win. To think that if this man, whoever he was, had actually won, he would have been the people's representative in the state assembly.
The future of Kolkata is in the hands of a few people. They number a few hundreds, maybe even the low thousands. All of them are aware that they wield control over everyone else, but they are unaware that their power to shape the lives of the residents of this town goes beyond what they imagine. As for the people of Kolkata, an overwhelming number of them are completely unaware of their existence. Badshah Khan works for Ghazi Baba's shrine under a banyan tree near Gocharan station every day of the week except Fridays. Gocharan in South 24 Paragnas lies on the Shialda South Lokhikantapur train line and is roughly 40 kilometers away from Kolkata. Khan specializes in fixing marital discord and, as he puts it, clearing obstacles to love. The photo that accompanies his advertisement in leading Bengali newspapers shows him holding a skull in one hand and a cutter of the kind held by Kali in the other. There's another skull placed precariously above his head as he looks into the camera with a seriousness that can be summoned only in the company of skulls. I call up Khan. He sounds affable, although distracted. Not at all the frowning man shown holding a skull and a cutter, not to mention a significant portion of the weight of the world. He tells me to come after 10 in the morning. I don't tell him that would be impossible, sitting as I am in Delhi. His fee is rupees 101, additional costs extra. As I click my phone off, it does strike me as being more than a bit disarming that a Muslim man is a practicing Kapalik, a Kali-worshipping tantric priest that one has encountered in popular culture. The fierce but benevolent one in Bankim Chandra Chattopadhyay's novel Kopal Kundala, and the terrifying but hilarious cannibal Kopalik in the film Charmurti, based on Narayan Shannal's stories for kids centered around the bumbling, cowardly, lovable figure of Tenida. There's probably nothing in the books that stops a Muslim from practicing tantric astrology. But I'm still impressed that Badshah Khan of Gocharan hasn't bothered to change his name. Clearly, he must be good at his job of clearing obstacles to love. Unlike Badshah, the Maharaj Sri Vishwanath Shastri looks far more approachable in his advertisement. With his broad smile, beard and afro hair, he looks very much like Billy Preston, the pianist who played the chunky bits in the Beatles' Get Back. What the mother worshipper and tantric astrologer Shastri can do according to his resume is quite impressive. He claims to have come out of service to many famous cinema and jatra actors and actresses of the past and present, as well as many politicians who are now at the peak of their success. What can Shastri fix? Delays in marriage, secret enmities, losses in business, failure in love and friendship, property and other legal disputes, court cases, financial crises, visitations by an unholy power or unholy spirit, hitches in horoscopes or any other complicated or secret problem. Shastri's chambers are scattered. On Mondays, he sits in the Kolkatta suburb of Bhavanagar in North 24 Paragnas, some 10 kilometers away from Hazra station. On Tuesdays, he consults from Salt Lake. On Thursdays, from Barakpur. On Fridays, from Hazra. And on Saturdays and Sundays, from his own temple in Behala. That's not too far from the famous Kali devotee and former cricketer Saurav Chandidas Ganguly's sprawling red brick residence, Sri Sri Mamangal Chandi Bhavan. Apart from being the author of the best-selling Astrology and Tantra in Human Life, Shastri has his own shows on Shishti TV and Channel Vision. Who comes to them for comfort, hope, confidence and relief? Whom do they save or at least distract? It would be naive to assume that their clients are only the Mufassal lot or the lower middle class Kolkatans and other suburban counterparts who live in tube-lit rooms with curtains for walls and whose young prefer the outdoors and the insides of shopping malls to their parental homes. The people sipping their Saturday gin and tonic at Calcutta Club, the man wearing a moonstone ring to ward off a niggling office problem, the bureaucrat with a fondness for Beethoven's late sonatas, the Punjabi electrical equipment shop owner in Vardhan market, and his non-Bengali businessman customer, they're all clientele. It's a world I detest and love.
You give the figure of 680 million people that, you give the figure of 680 million people that need jobs. Let's assume that miraculously our manufacturing engine cranks up. We still will not be able to produce those kind of jobs. So in our urban planning, where do jobs figure? And that is the point, because otherwise we'll build all those, the places that we plan to, but they'll be pieces of real estate essentially. With those people who are supposed to be there will not be there. What make great cities?
Basically, three things which are required in any process of urbanization. There is a technological creativity, there is an economic drive, and there is the cultural and artistic vibrancy of that city. So to my mind, any city to emerge will require an economic driver. And that economic driver can be anything. It can be a value-added agriculture, it can be manufacturing, it can be, Bangalore is an example of very good services sector development. It can be any of the three development. And I think each city will have to find out, depending on its planning process, what is its economic driver, where the creativity of economic drive will come from, depending on who's planning for that city.
Thank you all for being here.